I lay on the hospital bed as I looked into my son's eyes. He held my hand, squeezing it with immense force. "Mom, please don't go," he cried out to me. "I'm sorry you have to see me like this," I told him as my eyes softened with emotion. "I know you're angry and must hate me for not having convinced your father to make you his heir." I thought of the resentment my son had probably amassed towards me in the last few years. Anthony then roughly shook his head. "Mother, what are you talking about?" His reaction caught me off guard. Perhaps he didn't want to say it out loud to avoid being rude, but I didn't mind. "You didn't talk to me as much and you always seemed angry with me. I'm sorry I failed you." I apologized once more. He then let out a tired sigh. "You still don't get it, do you? You've never cared to. You've always been like this," he complained, disappointed in me. "What do you mean?" I asked him weakly in confusion. "You only ever focused on making me the heir father chose. You thought that's what I wanted, but it wasn't. All I ever wanted was to spend time with you. Everywhere I went I was ostracized and bullied for the situation we are in. My life has been a living hell. The one thing that could have made things better was you being around. But all you ever did was chase after father. I never cared about being the heir. I accepted that father hates me. But at least you could have been there for me. I really wish you could have spent more time with me." My eyes widened in horror as I looked into the eyes of my now 16-year-old son. All these years I thought I was doing everything to help him. Turns out I was doing everything wrong. How could I have been completely oblivious to how he felt? Now knowing that I'd basically wasted my time, I was ashamed of myself. How had I not noticed before? It's now on my deathbed that I realize it. When it's far too late. "Now I'm about to lose you and I'll be all alone," he said as he continued to cry. Watching him cry pained me immensely. To know that I had failed my child was a hard pill to swallow. Suddenly, I couldn't breathe, and my chest began to constrict. "Mom! Mom!" Anthony yelled out to me in panic. My body wasn't responding though, and I continued to shake. He ran to the doorway of the room. "Help! I need some help in here!" I heard him scream. I assumed it was for the hospital staff. My vision became blurry as I convulsed. I heard footsteps enter the room in a hurry. "She's going into respiratory failure," I heard someone yell. In the distance I heard the familiar voice of my son. He was crying. It was awful knowing I was traumatizing my son. I wished I could fix it all. To go back in time and redo all the things I'd done wrong. To spend more time with him and give him what he actually wished for. What was going to happen to him now if I died? If he's forced to move in with my ex-husband, there's no doubt in my mind that woman will kill him. I had failed as a mother. My one job was to protect my child, and I had failed, miserably. As the doctors tried to resuscitate me, I felt my body begin to shut down. My blurry-visioned eyes felt heavy and began to close. "No!" I screamed in my mind. "Please let me stay with my son. He'll be alone. Please, he needs me. I need to fix this. I can't die like this." To think I would die at the early age of 36 was unbelievable to me. I guess I was destined to the same fate as my mother, who also died when I was young. As my eyes closed and suddenly, I saw a blinding bright light appear before me, which was ironic since my eyes were closed. The light seemed to envelop me as it was all I could see, with nothing else that lay ahead. Was this me going to the afterlife? I wondered. The light stayed surrounding me for what felt like several minutes with nothing changing. Then suddenly, the light began to fade. Surprisingly, my eyelids no longer felt heavy. "I'm sorry, Mrs. Ackland, but Mr. Ackland is busy," I then heard a voice say. Unsure if I'd heard right, I slowly opened my eyes and was met with a woman seated behind a desk in front of me. "What?" I said, confused by the scene before me. "Mrs. Ackland," I said. "Mr. Ackland is busy, he can't see you right now," the woman repeated. "Mrs. Ackland?" I thought to myself in surprise. I hadn't been called that in so long. I divorced Keith 6 years ago. Ms. Towers was my maiden surname, and it's what I was called after the divorce. Mr. Ackland was Keith, my ex-husband. She looked familiar. I then looked around, taking in my surroundings. I was in a luxurious building's entrance hall, which I also recognized. This was the Ackland Holdings Limited HQ building. In front of me was the reception where two well-dressed women, the receptionists, were stationed. "Mrs. Ackland." She called out to me again, however, I still didn't respond. What was I doing here? How has this happened? I asked myself, shocked. Was this a dream? Pinched my arm. I certainly felt the pain. Was this real? This seemed like one of the many scenarios in which I would attempt to see Keith, and he would reject seeing me every single time. However, that was more than 3 years ago when I used to do that. In recent years, I had gotten ill and couldn't move around. Had I gone back in time? Had my wish come true? What in the world was going on? "Mrs. Ackland, unfortunately, we're going to have to call security if you don't leave," the receptionist informed me, pulling me out of my thoughts. I continued to ignore her, however, as a thought suddenly came to mind. Anthony. I could go see Anthony. I thought to myself, whether it's a dream or not, I have to see my son. It all started when my parents informed me of my arranged marriage to Keith Ackland, 21, when I was 19 years old. It was due to a business deal my father's company had formed with the Ackland family's company. The Ackland family owned the Ackland Holding Limited Company, an extremely successful international hotel company, with hundreds of 4- and 5-star hotels all over the world. Their family had an estimated net worth of over $20 billion USD. My father was the heir of a well-performing construction company. Although my family wasn't billionaires like the Acklands, we were millionaires, which was still impressive. The business deal our families had struck had to do with my father's company helping to construct some new hotels for Acklands. My marriage to the heir of the Acklands, Keith, was to strengthen the new partnership between the two companies. My marriage to Keith was loveless, which was to be expected as our marriage was arranged. However, after our wedding and we began to live together, we developed somewhat of an amicable relationship. A year into our marriage and we gave birth to our one and only child, our son Anthony. I loved Anthony so much and was completely devoted to raising him well. The first years of being Keith's wife were pleasant. However, everything changed. She came 7 years later. I would never forget that day. It was Keith's birthday, and I had organized a party to celebrate. All our family members and friends were present. As the party was in full swing with everyone enjoying themselves, suddenly a woman entered who caused everyone to stop and look at her. I immediately recognized her. She was Keith's former lover, Diana, from before we got married. When we got engaged, Keith stopped seeing out of respect for both our families and our union. However, I knew he had loved her and he felt guilty for leaving her. All this time I wondered what had happened to Diana, as she appeared to have disappeared from the social scene. I wondered why she was appearing now after 7 years. It was then that I noticed the child standing by her side and holding her hand. It was a boy who seemed close in age to Anthony, who was 7 at the time and looked strikingly like Keith. She then announced to everyone at the party that the boy was Keith's child. I would never forget the shock and utter disbelief I felt upon hearing this, as well as everyone else at the party. She claimed that after Keith had left her to marry me, she found out she was pregnant. After the party, she showed Keith an apparent DNA test to prove the boy was indeed his son. I felt the whole situation was suspicious. Keith felt guilty for abandoning her and the fact that she had to raise their son alone, so he decided to take her in and allowed her to stay in our house. At first, I thought her place in our home would be temporary as Keith figured out what to do with her. I was understanding of the situation to an extent, because I was sympathetic to the fact that Keith was forced to leave his lover for me. So, if that was his son, he was still the father and had to look after him. However, I never could have imagined the way in which things would have ended up panning out. Diana and Keith seemed to rekindle the romantic connection they had in the past, gaining his favor. With that, she began her smear campaign of me. For example, her belongings would go missing and then they would be found among my things. Or she would harass and bait me into a fight and then turn around and claim I was harassing her. Because of how it looked, Keith took her side, causing him to distrust me. She also formed a relationship with the servants of the house and began to turn them against me and my son. She soon took over the house and began to run it as if she was Keith's wife, pushing me to the side. To everyone in the house, I looked like I was the crazy, jealous wife who was harassing Diana. Diana's plan on taking my place in this house became clear to me. I had to stop her and fight for my place. Keith had her and her son attend public events with us as if we were one big happy family. He also told her to join me when I met with my friends who were the wives of his friends or business partners. At first my friends were on my side and felt the situation was wrong. Then after a while of meeting with Diana, they began to like her and eventually took her side. Diana had a way talking to people and making them like her. The same way she had turned the maids against me. As time passed, I saw Keith wasn't planning on having Diana leave our home, but in fact he was integrating her into the family. She had his favor and was well liked by everyone around. Before I knew it, Diana had taken away my husband, my friends, and my title. Worst of all, my son was put in a precarious position. Everyone began to think she was soon going to take my position, and I was going to be tossed aside. What's more is that they felt she deserved it more than me since her smear campaign had worked and my reputation was now negative. Everyone seemed to have turned against me and my son. I had no one to turn to. Even my own family turned against me. My father and older brother believed the rumors that were spreading about me and told me that Keith left me, they would take me back. The final blow was when the legitimacy of my son being Keith's biological child came into question. Unlike Diana's son, who looked exactly like Keith, Anthony's features were, unfortunately, more like mine. Keith acted as if he believed the rumors, even though he had been there throughout my pregnancy. He knew Anthony was his. I tried to fight for my place in my own home. Unfortunately, Keith seemed to fall deeper for Diana with each passing day whilst I became a stranger to him. He always picked Diana and her son. Everything just kept getting worse and worse. Due to my being difficult, since I kept trying to get his attention and I was bullying Diana, Keith had me move out of our house and sent me to a separate home. I tried to stop him, but there was nothing I could do. I still continued to fight and try to get him to choose Anthony. However, he would reject my requests to see him whenever I showed up at his workplace or home. He ended up requesting a divorce from me, and there was nothing I could do but accept it. He soon married Diana and made her his wife. I was devastated. However, I didn't want to give up yet. I wanted to keep fighting for my son. I believed my son deserved to be the heir. In my final years, my son and I had become completely isolated, and without anyone to help, Diana had successfully shut us out. Then I died, leaving Anthony with nothing. Back to main story. Jasmine's POV, Mrs. Ackland. Cassie, the receptionist, called out to me again. However, I still didn't respond. What was I doing here? How has this happened? I asked myself, shocked. Was this a dream? Pinched my arm. I felt the pain. Was this real? I looked back at Cassie and my surroundings, taking in the situation once more. This seemed like one of the many times I would attempt to see Keith to complain about how I was being treated or to discuss Anthony, and he would refuse to see me every single time. However, that was more than 3 years ago. In recent years I had gotten ill and couldn't move around. Had I gone back in time? Had my wish to go back in time actually come true? What in the world was going on? Mrs. Ackland, unfortunately we're going to have to call security if you don't leave, Cassie informed me, pulling me out of my thoughts. I was still trying to process the situation I was in. How on earth was I still alive? Whenever I came to see Keith, they always told me he wasn't available, but of course that wasn't true. Even if he was busy, he would allow Diana to see him. He just didn't want to see me. Then a thought suddenly came to mind. Anthony. I have to see Anthony. I thought to myself. Whether it's a dream or not, I have to see my son. My mind replayed the memory of him crying over me in distress as I died in the hospital room. How I wished I had been able to comfort him. So let me comfort him now and show him I'm here. I have to go, I said to the receptionist. I turned away from them and made to leave. Oh, and Mrs. Ackland, Cassie called out to me. Yes, I responded, looking back at the ladies. We were told by Mr. Ackland to tell you not to go to his home demanding to see him either, the woman said. Sure, I responded, uninterested. I then turned away and continued to make my way to the exit/entrance. I heard them talking about me as I walked away. Well, today she didn't put up a fight, did she? The other receptionist said. Yesterday she stayed for hours. She'll be back tomorrow, Cassie said. When will that poor woman realize the chairman doesn't want her? Cassie's words struck a nerve in me. That's right. Everyone looked down on me. I was seen as the poor abandoned wife who was desperate for Keith's attention. I left the building and was met with the busy city street of Yorkshire City. An afternoon sun shone on my face as a cool breeze swept by. I contemplated the last thing Cassie had said. She said I shouldn't go to his house, meaning this was a point in time I had already been moved out of the main house and to a separate house. I took out my phone from my handbag. I checked for the date and time. It was Saturday, April 3rd, 2015. This had been nearly a year since Keith had had my son, and I moved out of the main mansion, and almost 3 years since Diana returned to Keith's life. Suddenly a car pulled up beside the building entrance beside me. I turned to see a fancy black sedan parked by the drop-off point. The driver came out of the car and went to the passenger side door at the back. 2 other men who were large and menacing-looking came out from the car as well and rushed to the door where the driver was. As the driver opened the door, a woman came out. The 2 men, her bodyguards, helped her. My eyes widened in horror as I recognized the person. It was Diana. She was a beautiful, tall, slim woman, with blonde curled hair and green eyes. She was dressed well, looking like she was already the chairman's wife. She was definitely here to see Keith. He obviously wouldn't be too busy to see her. Then our eyes met. My eyes widened in surprise as I realized that I was just standing on the sidewalk looking at Diana. "Jasmine, is that you?" she said in that cold yet polite-sounding voice of hers. If I didn't know her well, I would have thought she was nice. "Diana," I said, "I see you're here as usual. Another day successfully meeting with Keith?" She then asked before laughing hysterically. She knew dang well I hadn't seen him. Then she got closer to me right till she was in my face. "I have taken back what belongs to me. No matter what happens, he will never listen to you." She was trying to bait me into fighting her. In the past, it always worked, and I would always attack her and then get in trouble with Keith. Memories came to mind of the countless times she would bait me into making myself look bad, and I would end up looking crazy. "I have to go," I said to her. "Jasmine's POV, I have to go," I said to Diana. "Not in the mood to talk today?" she asked me. In my past life, I would have taken the bait and gotten into it with her. I absolutely couldn't stand her. However, I should have always known that Diana would always win against me. It always angered me how she could smear my name, no matter what I tried. I hated to admit it, but she was good. Without responding to her, I turned away from her and began to walk away. I knew better than to engage with her now. I continued to make my way home. It was a Saturday, which meant Anthony was at home, not at school since it was a weekend. I had left him alone so I could try to meet with Keith. I was instantly ashamed of myself for having left him alone. Whenever I left Anthony at home, I always told him never to open the door for strangers or answer the doorbell. Plus, we lived in a gated, protected neighborhood. Still, it wasn't a good look. It's just that I couldn't take him with me and have him see me yelling at people. I went to the bus stop and took the bus home. Like Diana, I was supposed to have a car and driver to take me from place to place, but due to a certain situation, I couldn't. I arrived in the gated neighborhood where I lived. Upon arriving at the house, I stood in front and took a look. The home Keith had Anthony and me moved to was certainly not the massive mansion he lived in with Diana. However, it was still a beautiful home in a nice neighborhood. I unlocked the door and went inside. I found Anthony seated at the dining room table, drawing something. When he heard me enter, he looked in my direction. "Mummy," he said excitedly as he left the table and ran to me. "Tony." I greeted him excitedly. I opened my arms and picked him up. "You came home early today," he said, so relieved. "Last time you came home late, when you went to talk to Daddy." Suddenly, the conversation I'd had with his older self about how I was never there came to mind. I then felt my eyes fill with tears, and I began to silently cry. I'd been doing it to him for a long time. No wonder he ended up resenting me. I hugged him even tighter. "Whoa, Mom, I can't breathe," he giggled. "I'm sorry, don't worry. I won't leave you alone like that again," I assured him. "Really?" he asked me as we broke from the hug. I nodded my head in promise to him. "Why are you crying?" he asked me, concerned. The whole reason for my coming back was to be here for him. He had short chestnut brown hair, green eyes, and an olive skin tone. He smiled at me, and I noticed a gap in his teeth from a tooth that had fallen out. He was so adorable. I thought to myself, it was a little strange seeing him so young again, but he was the same old Tony I knew. He was 9 years old in 2015. I'll be back, I told him as I put my handbag down. I went to the bathroom. There's something I wanted to see. In the mirror by the sink, I looked at myself. I was completely taken aback by the image of the woman staring back at me. I was back to my healthier, younger self from 7 years earlier. In the 2 years leading up to my death, I had become frail, looking like the shell of who I once was, despite only being in my 30s. I brought my hands to my cheeks and slapped them hard. A sharp pain filled my cheeks. I had to confirm if I was dreaming once again. Still appeared to be real. I remembered my dying wish, which was to be able to redo my life and fix all the wrongs I'd done to my child. Had my wish really come true? It was hard to believe. Nonetheless, I was so grateful. I had a chance to fix things. Now the question was, how was I going to do that? Clearly, what I'd tried to do before in my previous life failed dismally. I kept trying to get Keith's attention because I was his first legal wife, and my son was the rightful heir to his company. I believed then and still believe now that Anthony had every right to that. Even after Keith divorced me and married Diana to make her son the heir, I got a lawyer involved and tried to take him to court. Unfortunately, I lost the case. I had just wanted to make sure Anthony got what was rightfully his, but I failed. And to make matters worse, I ended up dying, leaving him completely alone and with no financial security. I had failed as a parent. If I'm 29 again now, I have about 7 years until I'm scheduled to die. This time around, I had to make sure I left Anthony with something. Or better yet, find out what caused my death. I just had to figure out how I was going to do that. I continued to look at myself in the bathroom mirror. I took in my features, my long chestnut brown hair, my green eyes, and my olive skin. Anthony had nearly copied and pasted all my features. I thought of how Tony, looking similar to me, had people questioning whether he was actually Keith's son. First of all, I had the birth certificate to prove it. I had never been with another man my entire life. What's more, as Anthony grew older, his facial and body structure began to look more like Keith's. I thought of Tony when he was 16. He looked like Keith but with a different skin tone and hair color. I shook my head as I thought of all the slander Diana had put us through. I tried to turn on the sink tap to splash some water on my face, but no water came out. I was confused for a moment before I remembered the predicament my son and I typically faced in this house. I looked around and found a large bucket with collected water inside to use instead. I then went to the light switch and tried to turn it on, however, it didn't. We had no power or water, courtesy of Diana. I walked out of the bathroom and looked at the state of the house as I made my way back to the dining room. It was in disarray. I hadn't noticed it before, since I was more focused on Tony. We were also supposed to have maids to help clean the home, as well as a chef and gardener, but thanks to Diana, we didn't. When Keith kicked my son and me out of the main house, he then appointed the duties I had handled as his wife to her. Even though at the time I was still his wife. The wife's duties included hiring staff for the home, maids, gardeners, chefs, etc. Handling the finances of the house, salaries of workers, money for things required in the home like furniture, ingredients chefs needed, etc. So now that he entrusted the role to Diana, out of spite for me, she did as much as she could to inconvenience my life. What's more, she knew there was nothing I could do about it. I had already ruined my relationship with Keith, so he had no interest in checking in on what was going on with me. He just assumed Diana was doing her part. Most of the time, the reason I went to see Keith so often was to try to inform him of the situation I was in. However, he thought I was just trying to annoy him about making Anthony his heir. It had only been about 6/7 months since I started living here and about 3/4 months since Diana started her shenanigans of stopping the maids from working in the house, cutting the electricity, etc. The problem is I was a billionaire's wife who'd never had to work a day in her life. Even before I got married, I was pampered in everything I did. So, I wasn't used to cleaning after myself, let alone a whole house. As time passed with no change in the situation, I was forced to learn to clean and even to cook. Now with all my experience I could get right to work with no issue. But the inconveniences with Diana didn't end there. I took my phone out and I checked my bank account to see how much I had. I only had $1,000. As I was still his wife, Keith had organized for me to receive a monthly allowance of 50,000 USD. However, Diana made sure I never received the full amount. She would only give me a fraction of the amount each month, typically 1,000, and on top of that make sure I received it late. In short, I was made to feel like a beggar waiting for handouts. Before I could even think about how to be there for my son and formulate a plan to ensure he was financially secure in 7 years, I had solved this issue of Diana's meddling. If I could, I would turn to my family for help, but I couldn't rely on them either. I thought of my father and brother who had mercilessly abandoned me after Keith abandoned me as well. They believed the rumors just like everyone else and thought I was the problem. The quickest way to solve that issue would be to make my own money by getting a job. The problem, however, was that I got married at 19, which is around the time people went to university/college, and I didn't go. I was solely raised to be a wife, which meant I couldn't get a higher education job that paid more. I could only get small jobs like being a waitress, barista, shop clerk, etc. In my previous life around this time, I doubt I would have been able to take on such a job since I'd never worked before, let alone even consider it. Going from a billionaire lifestyle to an ordinary one was quite the jump. But now I certainly could take on the task with no issue. If anyone from my life before found out I was working a 9 to 5, they would probably laugh at me, but that didn't matter. I would forget about my pride and focus on what was more important, which was Anthony. As for how I should go about the issue pertaining to Diana and Keith, for starters, I think it would be best to completely forget about trying to fight with Keith to make. It didn't matter to him whether Anthony was the rightful heir or not. His choice was always going to be Diana and her son no matter what. I had to give up trying to fight for that, considering Tony himself in the future isn't even interested in being the heir. So, my strategy should be doing the next best thing to achieve my goal. I didn't want him to end up alone, nor did I want to leave him with nothing. Honestly, if it wasn't for Diana's sabotaging, with Keith's arrangement alone, there was so much I could do to try to ensure my son's future was secured. I could put most of the money in a savings account for Tony to use when he is older. I could invest in projects to make more money. "What's wrong, Mum?" Anthony asked me, bringing me out of my thoughts. He was probably noticing I was deep in thought. "Nothing," I told him. I then looked at the time. It was around 5 p.m. It was getting dark soon and we would need to have dinner. "Anyway, are you hungry? We can make something to eat." "You?" he asked me in surprise. "You're going to cook?" he asked me in disbelief. I nodded and smiled at him. In my past life at this point in time, I didn't know how to cook. I would take us out to eat whilst trying to save what little money we had. If I took care of the water and electric bills, that would take about a quarter of the money I had. It was still early in the month, and who knew when Diana would give me the next allowance. In any case, I had no choice because we needed water and power. We couldn't use water from buckets and candles for light. Diana was certainly not going to take care of it, and no one else was going to help me. In this life, I wouldn't let Diana's antics stress me out. I would cook and clean for myself and make money my own way. I went to the large kitchen and checked the cupboards and fridge to see what was inside. There wasn't much to cook with, and the refrigerator was empty because there was no power. "Let's go take care of the power and water bills, and then let's go shopping to get ingredients," I told Tony. After preparing ourselves to go out, we left the house and rushed to pay the bills before the offices closed. We then went to the grocery store to buy ingredients for dinner. Returning home, I was glad to see the power was working and we had water. Tony and I began to prepare dinner. I had him help me either cut some ingredients or put them into the pot. Mum, this is really good," he commented as he ate. "I didn't know you could cook." I smiled as he complimented my cooking. I'm glad he didn't have many questions about why I knew how to cook. I had years of practice unbeknownst to him. We ate dinner and washed the dishes. Then I had him prepare for bed. After he brushed his teeth, I tucked him into his bed. "So tomorrow you're really not going to see Daddy?" he asked. I recalled that on Sundays when Keith didn't go to work, I would go to his home, our former home, and demand to see him. He never let me see him, of course. "No, I'm going to stay with you," I assured Anthony. He smiled at me with a look of relief. "Sleep tight, Tony. I love you," I told him and kissed him on his forehead. "Good night, Mum," he told me. I caressed his hair as he slowly but surely began to fall asleep. I watched him as he slept for a while. My whole day replayed in my mind as I did. I couldn't believe I'd died and come back again. Regardless of how it had happened, I was just so grateful to have been given this second chance. Looking at Tony's peaceful sleeping face, I realized I had taken so many moments like this for granted. Funny how you appreciate something once you lose it. In this life, I wanted to enjoy every moment with my son after experiencing the regret I felt earlier. I wanted to have no regrets this time. After a while of watching him sleep, I got up and quietly left his room, closing his door behind me. With him now sleeping, my mind then went to worrying about our finances. With less than $1,000 and a whole month ahead of us, I had to figure out how to make more money. I couldn't rely on my family, nor could I rely on Keith and Diana. The only good thing about my situation was that I didn't have to pay rent. Keith owned this property. Hopefully, I will find a job soon, so we won't have to worry too much about our finances. After making sure all the doors were locked, I went to my room and began to work on my CV and research open job positions. I was hoping I would finish soon so that by Monday I could already start applying. The next day, Tony and I stayed at home. As I had promised him, I didn't go anywhere. I decided that this would be a good time to clean the house. It was a mess from, of course, my previous self had tried to clean things as best as she could since she had no maids. But the work was sloppy. It would be a few more years of having to clean for myself before I really got used to it. Tony helped me as well, and by the afternoon the house was immaculately clean. Once we were done, I took him to the park after lunch. It was relaxing not having to stress myself worrying about Keith or Diana, just having fun with my son. "Tony, you have school tomorrow. Remember to make sure all your books are packed, your uniform and your bag are ready," I reminded him once we returned home. Suddenly his expression changed. It went from being happy to nervous and sad. A look of concern then appeared on my face. "Yes, Mom," he responded and went to do as I had told him. I instantly knew he was worried about school, and it was most likely because of the situation we were in. There was no doubt in my mind that the other children were talking about our situation and giving him a hard time. I knew from my past life that when my friends stopped talking to me after they switched to Diana's side, their children, who were Tony's friends as well, turned away from him as well. It was unfortunate that he was suffering as if he had done something wrong. Tony went to a prestigious private school for wealthy families. At the very least, despite kicking us out of the house, Keith allowed Tony to remain enrolled at the school. Diana couldn't interfere with that because it would be obvious to Keith if he suddenly wasn't enrolled. Diana only inconvenienced us in things she knew Keith wouldn't find out about. Diana's son, Marco, was also enrolled at the school, which made me nervous. Since he was a year older than Tony, he was a grade above him, so at least they weren't in the same class. However, they would still occasionally bump into each other. I worried for Tony when they bumped into each other. I wondered if it was awkward for them. Was Marco also bullying him? Jasmine's POV after we had dinner. We cleaned up and then I had him prepare for bed. "Are you always going to spend time with me like this?" he then asked me as I tucked him into his bed. In my past life, I had let the stress of the Keith, Diana situation get to me. In the past, I typically would talk and briefly be with him before I would continue to devise ways to get Keith to make Tony the heir. I didn't spend this much time with him. He must be surprised by how I was suddenly so available. However, in this life now, knowing how things end, I wanted to give him my undivided attention. I wanted no regrets this time. If Keith's path was a dead end, then let me choose a path that definitely wouldn't be. I smiled as I looked into his eyes and nodded. "Yes, it's going to be like this from now on," I assured him. He began to laugh. "I'm so happy," he said. "Why?" "Didn't do anything. It's so much more fun when you're here." Hearing that almost made me tear up. I felt guilty again that I had been oblivious to how he felt. After talking to him for a bit, I put him to sleep and then quietly left his room. Once again before bed, I finished up working on my CV. The following day, I woke up early to help Anthony prepare for school, as well as to prepare myself to send out job applications. After breakfast, I left the house with Tony as I rushed to get him to school. Since we were using public transport, I worried we would get there late on top of having to face Yorkshire City's busy traffic. Upon arriving on time, luckily, I lead Tony into school. The school was beautiful, sophisticatedly designed and large. It was like a university campus with how big it was, maybe even bigger. Part of the reason was there were 3 school divisions that made up the school: a daycare, a primary school, and a high school. So the wealthy could easily keep their children in one place through the different stages of their education. By the entrance of the school building, I saw fancy car after fancy car pass by and drop off a child. Not a single child didn't have a driver. All these children were from rich families. Of course they all had drivers. I must have been the only to bring my child myself, let alone with public transport. Tony must be so embarrassed. As I walked my son to the entrance, I noticed a few of the parents who had come out of their cars to say goodbye to their kids looking at me and my son. The judgment was clear in their eyes. It wasn't hard to know what they were thinking. That's the woman whose husband kicked her out of the house. I just felt bad. Tony was also being affected. I knew many of them, either they used to be my friends or were Keith's friends. "Alright, enjoy your day at school. I'll come pick you up later," I quickly said to Tony, not wanting him to have to spend too much time with me as we got judged. Tony nodded his head in acknowledgement, but he didn't say anything. Whether it was embarrassment or fear, I didn't know, but I understood nonetheless. I then watched him walk off and enter the school building. I then turned away and walked away, leaving the school, feeling all the eyes on me as I walked away. I didn't mind the stares and being judged. However, I was worried for Tony to an extent. From the school, I then went into the Yorkshire City Centre and went to the various companies I had researched that had job openings. At each company I presented myself and my application. It was late in the afternoon when I was done with the last company I had to visit. I crossed my fingers as I hoped I would be accepted into one of the positions. Checking the time, it was 14:30 p.m. In about an hour I would have to pick up Tony, who was finishing at 1600 hours. I decided to have lunch and then get him. Upon arriving home, after I cleaned up and had Tony do the same, I then began making dinner as he did his homework. As we ate dinner, I tried to make conversation, but he didn't say much. His responses were short. Tony hadn't spoken much to me since I picked him up from school. Unlike yesterday when he was full of energy and extremely talkative, today, he seemed to be in a bad mood. My expression fell upon noticing this. I suppose school really depressed him. My mind then began to race as I thought of what I could do to help him in this situation. "Tony, is everything okay?" I tried to ask him. "I'm fine, Mom," he responded in a low voice. Clearly, he was lying to me. I felt sad that he didn't feel comfortable opening up to me. At bedtime I went to tuck him in. I could only hope that sleeping would help him wake up feeling more positive. But then I realized he would be returning to the place that made him depressed. He got into his blankets. Then I noticed his pajama top was buttoned up wrongly. Was he so upset he hadn't noticed? I wondered. "Your buttons are done all wrong," I said to him as I brought my hand to his pajamas and unbuttoned one of the misbuttoned parts. Doing so, I was then met with a dark purple mark that was on his chest. His hand quickly grabbed mine to stop me from continuing. However, I had already seen the mark. "Your buttons are done all wrong," I said to him as I brought my hand to his pajamas and unbuttoned one of the misbuttoned parts. Doing so, I was then met with a dark purple mark that was on his chest. His hand quickly grabbed mine to stop me from continuing. However, I had already seen the mark. "Tony, what is that?" I asked him worriedly. I moved his hand away and looked at the mark once more. Once again he pulled away from me so I wouldn't see. "Don't worry, Mum, it's nothing. I'll fix my shirt myself," he said to me. I was horrified by his answer. "What do you mean it's nothing? It's completely purple," I told him. "I fell." He told me. I knew he was lying to me. That was an awkward position to fall on. It looked like a bruise caused by being hit. Had this happened at school? It must have been. Someone did this to him? I asked myself as the realization dawned on me. In my past life, I never saw him with bruises or anything of the sort. I then remembered my son's words to me the day I died. My life was hell all these years. I knew Anthony was being shunned at school because of the situation he and I were in. However, I never imagined the bullying was physical as well. To think he was hiding it from me so I wouldn't worry. So that meant in my past life he had always hidden them from me? I should have really paid more attention to him. If I hadn't been so focused on Keith's situation leaving him at home alone, I would have known. I really was a bad mother. What was important now was to protect my son. Unfortunately, there was nothing I could do to stop the bullying. The children bullying him all came from important families, so like Keith, they were untouchable. However, there was one thing I could do. Tony, I started slowly. If you want to change schools, just tell me. Huh? He asked me surprised. Tony didn't want to talk to me about what had happened because he was being shamed and bullied over a situation that was beyond his control. Perhaps changing to a school where people didn't know him could help. He could freely make new friends and have a fresh start. I could simply unenroll him from the school. Why would Keith care? You don't have to worry about giving me an answer right now, I told him, noticing the look of confusion that was still on his face. Tell me when you're ready, or if you feel like school is too much. We can work something out, I told him. The expression in his eyes then changed to one I couldn't read. He then broke eye contact with me and looked at his bedsheets instead. He didn't want to talk about the situation, so I wouldn't force him if it made him uncomfortable. I just wanted him to know that I was there for him if he needed help. So, Mum, you're never going to go see Dad again? He asked me. No, not never see him. It's just Daddy's a busy person, you see. I tried to explain to him. He's busy with that other Diana lady and Marco, right? He then asked me. My eyes widened in surprise. It's not that I didn't expect Anthony to know about the situation we were in. He was there when we used to live with Keith. He saw Diana and her son move in and how we were cast aside. It's just, I'm realizing I've never straightforwardly spoken about the situation with him, especially when he was around this age. Even as he got older, I should have realized that just because he's a child doesn't mean he's oblivious to what's happening. I mean, to my knowledge, his bullying at school started recently following the Diana situation. Is there something someone told you at school about Diana? I asked him, wondering why he suddenly brought up Keith. Perhaps the bullies had said something to him today. They said Dad doesn't love me and you aren't anymore because you're crazy, and that's why we were kicked out of the house, he told me. So, I told them that you're not crazy and started a fight with them. Then they told me I was crazy just like you. I winced, feeling stung on his behalf. The stories of my jealousy of Diana causing me to attack and insult her had spread around. I had Diana to thank for my current reputation. I just felt awful that it was also affecting Tony. Looking at Tony, I realized there was no point trying to sugarcoat the situation. It's better if HR got used to the situation before and came to accept it. Keith was no longer going to be a part of his life, since things were only going to get worse. In a year, he would ask me for a divorce. He would then marry Diana and make her son his heir. Look, Tony, things are difficult with your father right now. We probably won't see him for a while. However, I promise I'm here for you no matter what. Okay? I said to him. He met my eyes full of emotion, and he nodded his head in understanding. Good, I said to him. And also try not to get into any more fights. People are going to say all kinds of horrible things to you. Try not to get upset. I cautioned him. How can I when they are saying horrible, untrue things about you? He asked me angrily. Keith, even if you hate me, Tony is completely blameless. For you completely discarding him is disgusting. I thought to myself. I told Tony the truth about the situation, but it was wrong that he had to accept the situation. He had done no wrong. Keith, even if you hate me, Tony is completely blameless, so for you to completely discard him is disgusting. I thought to myself. I told Tony the truth of the situation, but it was wrong that he had to accept the situation. He had done no wrong. He didn't ask to be born. No child should be told to accept that their parent doesn't want them. What's funny is Keith took Diana and her son in because he felt guilty for abandoning them. Now in turn he was abandoning his other family to make space for them. Just ridiculous. Do you still want to go to school tomorrow? I asked him. After getting into a fight, I thought perhaps he needed a break since he wasn't doing well. No, I'm fine, Mum. I can go, he told me. I looked at his face for a moment, studying his eyes. All right then, I accepted his answer. After putting Anthony to bed, I left his room, did one final check or house doors before going to my room. I went to bed that night conflicted. I didn't know what to do about Anthony. My heart was telling me to get him out of that school. He was being bullied ruthlessly and he was feeling down. I was so worried for his mental health. Considering my past life, it seemed like he was able to get through the bullying, but he suffered a lot. I imagine he was in so much pain for so long and I wasn't there for him. At a new school, he wouldn't have to worry about all that. At the same time, my heart was telling me that my mind was telling me he should stay. That school was the best in the country. It had state-of-the-art resources and graduates would receive tons of offers to excellent universities. In my past life, I would have loved to see which university he went to since he only had 1 year of high school before graduating at 17. However, that wasn't worth his mental health deteriorating. Nonetheless, it was Tony's call to make. As much as I so worried for him, I didn't want to only do what I thought was best for him, given how that panned out in my past life. I wanted to hear him out as well. As I approached my bed, I opened one of the drawers to get something out and noticed an interesting book. I picked it up and found out it was my diary. In my past life, I used to write in it a lot. Upon opening it, I found entry after entry of me devising plans to speak with Keith. It seemed so obsessive as I read through it. And in my past, it would only get worse as the years passed. I physically cringed as I looked at the book. I should have been more worried about Tony than Keith. I threw in the bin once I was done. Didn't that anymore. The following morning, Anthony and I wake up early to prepare him for school. I was hoping he would give me his answer as he ate breakfast. But he didn't. He probably wasn't ready yet and was still contemplating. I wouldn't rush him. After we were done preparing, I then rushed to take him to school. Even though I wasn't doing anything that day, I had dress up to take Tony to school. I couldn't dress casually at such a classy, prestigious school where all parents dressed well. Once he was dropped off, I returned home and cleaned up a little. With no job yet, I could only lounge around. Had it been the me in my past life, after dropping off Tony at school, I would have went straight to Keith's and then left when it was time to pick him up. That is, if Keith's security hadn't kicked me out before then. So I sat by the couch and turned on the TV. It was around noon when I received a call from one of the restaurants I'd applied to work. They told me they had an opening right away and I could start the next day. The pay was reasonable, around $2,000 a month, which was better than Diana's $0,000. My working hours would be from 9:30 a.m. to p.m., so I could take and pick up Tony from school. I agreed and said I would come the following day. As soon as the call ended, I began to jump up and with joy. I couldn't believe I'd found a job so quickly. I received 2 more calls from 2 other restaurants later on that also gave me an offer, but that wasn't as high as the first restaurant, so I declined their offers. Later that day, I went to pick Tony up from school. I had been worried about Tony all day after I'd seen his bruise yesterday. When he came to me as I waited for him outside the school building, his mood seemed normal. He didn't seem as upset as he was the day before, so I'm hoping the day went better. We got home and did our usual nighttime routine. He did his homework and prepared his things for the next school day. Meanwhile, I prepared dinner. Thankfully, he was talking to me. It's when I took him to bed that he finally gave me an answer about what I'd asked him the day before. Mom, I don't want to change schools right now, he told me in a calm tone. I'll be fine. As I made eye contact with him, my eyes welled up with emotion. That wasn't the answer I was expecting. Are you sure? I asked him. If the physical and verbal bullying was too much for him, I didn't want to suffer for no reason. I'm a big boy now. I can handle myself, he told me. Are you sure? I asked him. If the physical and verbal bullying was too much for him, I didn't want to suffer for no reason. I'm a big boy. I can handle this, he told me. It's not about being a big boy though, I thought to myself. It's not like he was weak for wanting. There was no fear in his eyes. He really seemed serious. Anthony. I started by saying his full name. I can handle it, Mum. He interrupted me, however. I can handle it because I have you now. he told me. My eyes widened in surprise. It's been a few days, Mom, but you seem different. You smile more, and you spend more time with me. I've been so happy. Even though Dad's not here and everyone treats us differently, when I'm with you, I forget about all that, he told me. Tears filled my eyes and began to stream down my cheeks. I pulled him in for a hug. All right, you win, Tony, I thought to myself. The words he said to me the day I died came to mind. If you'd been there for me, I could have handled it. He had meant what he said. I'm sorry I left you alone all those times. I apologized to him. It's what I wanted to say to him that day in the hospital room. He then hugged me back. I'll be here from now on, I told him once more. We'll get through this. We get through this. I love you, Mom, he then said. I love you too, I immediately responded. I was about to burst into tears but managed to hold myself back. I couldn't fall apart now. We said goodnight to each other, and then I left his room. I went to bed that night feeling at peace, like a heavy weight had been lifted off me. My son and I were getting closer. I was making progress in my plan to fix things and give my son what he truly wanted. To hear him say that just made me feel so happy as a mother. I was so grateful to have been given a second chance. I would make sure not to make it go to waste. The next day, after dropping off Tony at school, I went straight to the restaurant where I'd accepted the job offer. It was a fancy, popular restaurant with many chains around the city called the Garden House. I had eaten there a few times with Keith and Tony in the past. I even knew who the owner of the Garden House chain was. He was an elderly man who had been friends with Keith's family. However, he later sold the company to another company and retired. I wasn't sure who the current owner was, just that the Garden House chain was now a subsidiary company. I wasn't interested in researching further, as it wouldn't do me good if I found out and knew who they were. No doubt there was a chance that other wealthy people I knew would have meals at the restaurant and probably see me working. The rumors would spread fast about Keith's abandoned wife, who now worked at a restaurant. I let out a sigh. I couldn't worry about that. I had to focus on getting the money my son and I needed, which was more important than being gossiped about. I arrived at the restaurant and was introduced to the manager, who was also my new boss. He was a middle-aged man named Giovanni. We had our introductions. Then I explained my position as a waitress and what I would do. He then showed me around the restaurant, introduced me to the staff, and then we finalized the contract. I then changed into my work uniform and began my first shift with the help of my fellow coworkers so could learn from them. I quickly discovered being a waitress was hard. I was moving and running around the place, dealing with diners, taking orders, delivering ready orders to tables, listening to complaints, etc. Despite being overwhelmed, I encouraged myself to do my best as I needed time to get used to it. By the time I was done, I was completely exhausted. I felt like taking several breaks as I went to pick up Tony. All in all, I would say it was a good first day at work. The following days were normal and uneventful, which was a relief. I took Tony to school and I went to work. Tony didn't come home grumpy, nor did he get into any fights. He informed me work was going well, but I was still struggling since it was still early days, so I continued to do my best. I just needed time. I was looking forward to the weekend as I was paid weekly by the restaurant. The weekend was when Tony and I would have time to spend with each other. I wanted us to do an activist, either going to the zoo, aquarium, or something. Keith's POV. I sat in my office as I went through several documents. I had to prepare for a meeting I had soon with the board of directors on the direction we were taking this company. I then heard the ring of the bell to my office. For security reasons, only people I approved could be let into my office. Chairman, someone's here to see you, my PA Edward said, my eyebrows furrowed in confusion. To my knowledge, I had finished all my meetings for the day. Everyone knows they have to set up an appointment with me. Oh gosh, Edwin, don't tell me it's Jasmine, I said in annoyance. Had informed him to give the order that whenever Jamine came to see me, she should be refused. No, Chairman, as per your orders, she is refused whenever she tries to see you. I was feeling sorry for the receptionists who had to deal with her on my behalf. And in any case, she hasn't come to the office in the past week. He told me. My eyes widened in surprise. Giving me a break, is she? I asked and chuckled. How kind of her. Jasmine had been coming to office and the mansion nonstop every day. She was completely off her rocker. I wonder what had possessed her to suddenly stop? It's CEO Goodwin. He said he has an update on an accounting situation you told him to look into last week. He informed me. Ah, I see. I responded in understanding my expression becoming serious as I remembered the order I had given the CEO. Allow him in. I accepted. Soon a short, stout man in his early 40s came into the room. Harold Goodwin. He was a hard worker and extremely dependable. In the 4 years since he'd been serving as the CEO, he had been doing a wonderful job. Good afternoon, Chairman Ackland. He greeted me. Mr. Goodman, have a seat. I started. After he sat on one of the 2 seats opposite my desk, I then said, I hear you have an update for me. Yes, I checked with the CFO and the finance department, he told me. This is a more in-depth report on the finances of the company in the last year. He then placed a file on my desk, which I took and immediately opened and read. As the CEO, he was tasked with controlling all internal operations of the company and reporting to me and the board of directors everything that was going on. A position I was very familiar with as I was once the CEO of Ackland Holdings before I became chairman. I also asked the accountants and financials advisors if there's anything concerns. They wanted to report and they said they had nothing to report, all as well. He further informed me. I see. I responded as I went through the document looking for the information I wanted to see. At the time when you asked me to give a report on the finances, I didn't say anything, but I wanted to ask if there's an issue. He asked me. The week before, after he'd made a presentation to the board of directors on the progress of the company, I suddenly asked him to give me an in-depth report on the company's accounting, all the money going in and out of the company. It's understandable why he would wonder if something was wrong. No, there's nothing wrong. I simply responded as I continued reading the document. I just wanted to double-check the numbers, that's all, as well as ensure that all is well in the finance department. I understand, he replied. Thank you, Mr. Goodwin, that'll be all. You're free to leave. I dismissed him. He said goodbye to me and left the room. How strange, I thought to myself as I finished with the report CEO Goodwin had given me. The finances seemed to check out. I would keep it and look at it later. The truth is, there was something I found strange about the finances of the company when Goodwin made the initial presentation the last week. The numbers I had estimated for the company's spending and buying for the year compared to the reality were quite different. The actual numbers were much higher than I expected. Also, the profits I had estimated were different from the actual profits that were lower than my. However, looking at the document, everything seemed to be accounted for. Perhaps I had made the wrong estimation? Was I overthinking this? The Ackland Holdings company was a massive empire that was growing fast around the world. Running it required a lot of work. You had to be alert at all times, or you could get struck where you least expect. There was no harm in double-checking. However, I was worried because this is the second time my estimations were wrong. The same thing had occurred the year before. However, unlike last year, this time I asked for a follow-up report to check myself. I looked out of the clean glass window of the office, take in the view of the whole city. It's been 4 years since my father stepped down as chairman. I wanted to fill the role well and be just as good a chairman as my father and grandfather. Chairman? Are you listening? I heard Edward ask me, pulling me out of my thoughts. Sorry, what did you say? I asked Edward, who brought me out of my thoughts. I had forgotten he was still in the office with me. I just noticed your mind seems preoccupied, he told me. Don't worry, it's nothing, I assured him. If you want, I can find out what Miss Towers has been up to, he suggested. Now, why would I care about that? I asked him, confused. Did he think I was thinking about Jasmine? I just thought you might be curious as to what's possibly occupying her time now, since she hasn't come for a whole week. Perhaps she's sick, he said with a mischievous smile. I cocked an eyebrow at him. His words were ones of concern, but his expression didn't show concern at all. I realized he was the one who wanted to know about Jasmine. Keith's POV, if you want. I can find out what Miss Towers has been up to, he suggested. Now, why would I care about that? I asked him, confused. Did he think I was thinking about Jasmine? I just thought you might be curious as to what's possibly occupying her time now since she hasn't come for a whole week. Perhaps she's sick? He said with a mischievous smile. I cocked an eyebrow at him. His words were ones of concern, but his expression didn't show concern at all. I realized he was the one who wanted to know about Jasmine. One might mistake you for a woman the way you love gossip and being nosy, I told him, as my right-hand man who had been working for me for a long time and knew a lot about me. I knew he found the situation between Jasmine and me quite entertaining. Whatever do you mean? He asked as if he had no idea. If you weren't good at your job, I'd have you fired for overstepping into your boss's business. I warned him in a stern voice. He nervously laughed as he looked at me. I apologize, sir, he shakily said. I let out a sigh. Go ahead then. Find out what she's up to. I allowed him. There was no harm in keeping tabs on her, and in the unlikely chance she is sick she wouldn't be able to contact me since I had cut off all communications with her. Only my representatives would speak to her on my behalf to her. Yes, Chairman, he responded. He tried to be professional and keep a straight expression, but I could hear the excitement in his voice. What an idiot, I thought to myself. Now let's finish up for the day, I ordered him. Only an hour was remaining before our work hours ended. We finalized some documents and went through the schedule for the next day. Edward clocked out first when work was over and left my office. As I packed up my things so I could leave, my mind went back to Jasmine. I soon planned to divorce Jasmine. I was currently working on the documents and formalities required. I also wanted to wait a bit before I presented her with the papers. Considering the state she was in these days, I knew she wouldn't take it well when I presented the papers to her. I hated treating Jasmine this way, but her actions were unjustifiable. She had brought this on herself. Initially, when Diana returned 2 years ago with our son Marco, I understood the difficult position Jasmine was in. She was suddenly finding out I had a child from before our marriage. I too was shocked to find out I had another son I hadn't known about all this time. It must have been uncomfortable for her when I had Diana live in the house as well. In my mind, I was trying to do the right thing. I felt awful for Diana, who had to struggle raising our son alone all these years. Her son was faultless in this as well. Jasmine and I didn't have romantic feelings for each other, but our relationship was amicable. I honestly couldn't have asked for a more pleasant, arranged marriage for the years before Diana's arrival. When I spoke to Jasmine about the situation and what I was trying to do, she seemed to understand. She also knew that Diana and I were lovers before we got married. Throughout our marriage I had been faithful, I never cheated on her, so she knew I didn't have a baby on her. I simply wanted to make a plan for Diana and our son Marco. I wanted to organize a home for her and Marco to stay, and as well as an allowance, I owed it to them. However, Jasmine then began acting strangely. She began mistreating Diana. She would steal her belongings and start fights with her. It was so bizarre. I couldn't believe it at first. I would investigate and research the situation and find out that Jasmine was behind it. Whether it was out of jealousy or something else, I didn't know. It made no sense to me. I tried talking to her about it so I could understand, however. She would claim she was innocent and being framed. As time passed, the bullying just got worse. No matter how many times I tried talking to Jasmine, there was no getting through to her. I felt bad for Diana, who was faultlessly being picked on. Seeing no other option, I ended up kicking Jasmine and Anthony out of the house, giving her the arrangement I had initially planned for Diana. If Jasmine couldn't be mature and behave properly, then I had no choice. I was hoping we could come to an agreement on the new living arrangements, but it proved to be difficult. She didn't want to take accountability for the things she did to Diana, and claimed innocence despite the evidence clearly pointing to her. She started demanding to get back in the main house and demanding that I make Anthony the heir. The situation became ridiculous, as she would come every day to see either at the HQ or my home to make her demands whilst refusing to take accountability. I couldn't talk to her anymore. The image of the sensible, respectable woman I knew was gone. Divorce was unfortunately now the only option, so I could legally keep her away from me because her obsession wasn't going to stop. I would ensure that she and Anthony received a more than generous amount of money in our divorce. They would be well taken care of, but unfortunately, We couldn't live together anymore, not with her sudden, irrational, unpredictable change in character. Diana. I said her name as I walked up to her. Keith. She whispered my name as she smiled up at me. I immediately felt disarmed. I always felt at peace when I was with Diana. I never imagined we'd rekindle our relationship, but here we were. I couldn't talk to her anymore. The sensible and respectable woman I knew was gone. Divorce was unfortunately now the only option, so I could legally keep her away from me because her obsession wasn't going to stop. I would ensure her and Anthony received a more than generous amount of money in our divorce. They would be well taken care of, but unfortunately, we couldn't live together anymore, not with her sudden, irrational, unpredictable change in character. I left my office and made my way to my car, which was waiting for me just outside. Upon arriving home, I was met with my son Marco by the mansion entrance. I removed my coat, which was taken by one of the maids who were by the entrance awaiting my arrival. My bag was also taken and would be delivered to my home office. Hey Marco, were you waiting for me? He asked me. I've just come from saying goodbye to my tutor, and saw you arriving, so I decided to wait, he explained. I see, I said. How was your day at school? It was good, Dad, he replied. My eyes then zoned in on his face that was strikingly similar to mine. Then I noticed his cheek was slightly red. Is your cheek all right? I asked him. He seemed to freeze at my pointing it out. Yes, Dad, it's fine, he told me. I just hurt myself. You should be more careful, I told him. Yes, Dad. Okay. I'll see you at dinner then, I told him. I then left Marco and made my way to my room. Upon opening the door, I was met with Diana, who seated at the dressing table. Diana. I said her name as I walked up to her. She stood up from the dressing table and came to me. I opened my arms and pulled her in for a hug. Keith. She whispered my name as she smiled up at me. I immediately felt disarmed. I always felt at peace when I was with Diana. So how was your day? I asked her as I lowered my head to hers and gave her a brief kiss. It was all right. Just went to see some of the ladies and we watched a tennis game, she told me. Sounds fun, I commented. Would have been more fun if I was with you instead, she then said. My expression then changed. One of embarrassment. I felt guilty. I had been busy with work for the past 2 weeks with little to no breaks. I would either be at the office at the HQ, attending conferences, meetings, or if I was at home I'd be in my home office. I'll do my best to clear schedule this weekend. We can do something together, I told her. You promise? She asked as I looked into those beautiful brown eyes of hers. I promise. And to make up for not spending time with you, I'd like to give you a gift to apologize. What is it you want? I asked her. She started as if thinking hard. To have your last name. My eyes widened and lips curved into a smile. I then chuckled after a moment. How sneaky of her to casually say that. Diana Ackland. I like the sound of that. Don't worry, I'm working on it, I assured her. Before the end of this year, I planned to divorce Jasmine. I was working on divorce papers with my lawyers and putting together the terms of the divorce. There was a high chance Jasmine would go against the divorce and try to sue me afterwards. I wanted to prevent any chance of her winning the case. I then grabbed Diana's hand and stretched out her fingers. Before long you'll be wearing a ring you're worried will break your finger from how heavy it is, I assured her. That sounds nice, she said to me with a big smile. I can't wait to finally be your wife. After so many years, I felt a pang in my chest upon hearing those words. I was reminded of when we broke up with her 10 years ago, back when we were 22 years old. I remembered having to explain to her my family had set me up to marry someone else. The betrayal and heartbreak in her eyes. She cried for so long. I felt so guilty. I had really loved her then, and it hurt me that I had to hurt her. However, I thought she would get over me and find someone else with time. I had no idea she would become pregnant and have to raise the child on her own. She had gone through so much. Then, as if she hadn't suffered enough, Jasmine just had to bully and mistreat her out of jealousy. Diana was a kind, beautiful person. She cared so much for our son. She didn't deserve all she had been through. I promise you things will be different this time, I told her. I wouldn't let her down again. It's not that I wanted things to turn out this way. I never imagined I'd rekindle my relationship with Diana, but here we were. For the first 5 years of my marriage to Jasmine, our union was important for the business deal our two families had made. However, once the contract was up after the 5 years, there was no longer as much pressure to uphold the marriage, especially since Jasmine and I had an heir. However, we decided we would stay married since we had an amicable relationship. I was interested in anyone else, and neither was Jasmine. Even when Diana returned to my life, I had still planned to remain married to Jasmine as we worked out get through the situation with Diana. If Jasmine hadn't lost it, none of this would have happened. So again, Jasmine brought this on herself. Diana's POV. What do you mean she's working in a restaurant? I asked Miles, one of my servants, who had just given me the update on Jasmine. I saw she's working at a restaurant in the city, the Garden House, as a waitress, Miles repeated. My mouth was agape. At first, I thought he was joking, but his expression was not indicating this was a joke. Oh God, you're serious? I then let out a loud laugh. Yes, ma'am, he said. I never would have imagined she would resort to that, I said as I continued laughing. I knew Jasmine needed money. Since the $1,000 a month I gave her out of the $50,000 a month she was supposed to receive wasn't going to be enough, especially since she had to pay bills, electricity and water. I had reduced the amount of the allowance she was supposed to receive to teach her a lesson. I was surprised when I heard she hadn't come to see Keith at the HQ or at home for almost a week now. It was very odd, as for almost a year now, she'd been desperately trying to get Keith's attention, stalking him. I was wondering if she had fallen ill. I never would have imagined it was because she found a job. What more, a peasant's job? Who knew she would become that desperate? Serve that bitch right. I then thought to myself and laughed once more. I guess she finally realized that no matter how hard she tried, her situation at her home wasn't going to change. Her best bet was to get a job. You took my man and think you can take his money and continue to live off him? You're lucky he even gave you a house, because if I could, I would take it away from you. So go get a humiliating job. If only Keith wasn't such a people pleaser, giving her a nice house and still such a high allowance. It was so annoying. She didn't deserve that. It's why, as I was in charge of our home's affairs, I stopped her servants from working there, cut her allowance, cut her electricity and water. I knew Keith wouldn't find out because he hated her too much to care to check on her. But by far my biggest gripe with Jasmine was that she was still Keith's legal wife. That had to change. Thank goodness it wouldn't be long before that was no longer an issue. I had worked so hard in the last 2 years to completely ruin Jasmine's reputation, making sure even a pushover like Keith have no choice but to turn against her. I knew he was making plans to divorce her and to marry me. The mistake that had occurred 10 years ago would finally be rectified. The only good thing about Jasmine was that she had the incredible ability to sabotage herself. Out of desperation to prove her innocence of the things I accused her of, she would confront me directly and end up incriminating herself further. Not realizing I had cleaned up my tracks well so none of her accusations would stick. She only made herself look crazier. Out of desperation, she would continue to try to prove her innocence. However, she would only push Keith further away from her, making my work so much easier for me. I didn't have to plot as much. Also, as Keith cared less and less about her, I could torture her in that house she was staying in without him finding out, since he wouldn't check on her. Now that I knew why she hasn't been coming to see Keith in the past week, even if she hadn't come looking for Keith for a few days at the end of the day, I knew she still wanted to see him. She was probably devising a plan on how she was going to speak to him. She wanted to make her son the heir after all. She would obviously make an appearance at the Ackland event. I was looking forward to it. I wanted to see how she was going to embarrass herself next. After all these years of patiently waiting for the right time to strike, I was finally going to become Mrs. Ackland. Thank you for the update, Miles. You can go. I dismissed him. Continue to keep an eye on her from afar. Yes, ma'am, he said and left the room. Miles was supposed to be one Jasmine's servants at her house, but since I made all her servants stop working there, I had them do my personal errands instead. It had been an hour since I returned home from watching a tennis game. I finished my tea and went to Keith's and I bedroom to change out of the outfit I had worn into something more comfortable. Keith and Marco would return in a couple of hours. There was then a knock at the door as I sat at the dressing table redoing my makeup. "Who is it?" I asked. "It's Marco, Mum," I heard the voice reply. Checking the time, I saw it was 5 p.m. Marco came back from school around this time. He would come to greet me every day after school. However, I noted he was a little late today. I wondered what took him so long. "Come in," I called out for the maid to enter. Soon my head maid came in with Marco by his side. "Good afternoon, Mum," he greeted me. As he got closer to me, I took in his appearance. I saw his dark hair and blue eyes that put me at ease. "Marco, how was school?" I said in acknowledgement to him as I continued to look at him. "It was fine," he told me. I then noticed something wrong as I looked at his clothes. "Why have you changed your clothes?" I asked him. Those weren't the clothes he was wearing this morning when he went to school. "Ma'am, the young master fell in the fountain, and so I've had him cleaned up before he came to see you." "What?" I shouted hysterically as I got up from my dressing table. "Why wasn't I called? How many times have I told you not to touch my son? You know he has sensitive skin, and that's why I always have to be present," I yelled at the maid. Diana's POV, "What?" I shouted hysterically as I got up from my dressing table. "Why wasn't I called? How many times have I told you not to touch my son? You know he has sensitive skin, and that's why I always have to be present," I yelled at the maid. I had told them several times that I am the only one who can touch my son. "But ma'am, it was an emergency he had to change, and I had him use the correct." The maid tried to defend her actions. "I don't care," I interrupted her. "You should have come straight to me, I would have handled it myself. I am his mother. What if he gets a skin infection or breaks out into hives due to him putting on the wrong lotion or using wrong soap? Yes, he's 10 years old, but that doesn't mean he can't make mistakes when he's washing up. That's why I have to be present," I screamed at the servant. "I apologize, ma'am, but She tried again. "Get out. You're fired. I want you out of my house now," I yelled. The maids knew this was a serious rule with no exceptions. "But ma'am," she tried to plead with me. "Don't make me have to repeat myself." I hissed at the maid and stepped forward as if I was about to hit her. The maid fearfully flinched as she began to cry. She then quickly left the room after that. I then dismissed the head maid as well. When only Marco and I remained, I turned to him. "Marco, how many times have I told you to be careful? Now look at the mess it creates," I frustratedly yelled at him. "I'm sorry, Mum," he apologized fearfully. However, I wasn't having it, and I slapped him across the face. His head rolled to one side. He brought his hand up to his cheek and bit his lip as he fought back tears. He then slowly looked back at me. "From now on, you never let anyone get near you under those circumstances when I'm not present. Do you understand?" I yelled at him. He knew this rule more than anyone else. He wasn't supposed to bath or change clothes when only servants were around. I had to be there. Even at school, he didn't do swimming class for this exact reason. "Yes, Mum," he accepted my order in a shaky voice. "Stop crying," I said, annoyed by his tears streamed down his little cheeks. He knew crying didn't work on me, especially for something as serious as this. "Yes, Mum," he said as he aggressively wiped them away. I inspected his face and hair one last time and then let him go. "Now go and do your homework with the tutor. He's waiting for you in your study room," I ordered him. "Yes, Mum," he said and quickly left the room. Marco had to be the perfect son in order to impress Keith. He had to dress well, act well, he had to have outstanding grades at school. Everything had to be just right. He had to be the perfect the same way I had to act like the perfect partner for Keith. That way, no matter how hard Jasmine tried, I would always win. To everyone, we would always look like the more deserving ones to be beside Keith. Marco was going to be Keith's heir. I sat back down at my dressing table and continued to do my makeup. Keith would be coming home soon, so I needed to be ready. It was 2 hours later when Keith arrived home. He entered our bedroom and called out my name. "Keith," I said as walked up to him and hugged him. "How was your day?" he asked me. "I watched tennis with the ladies," I told them. The ladies in question were all Jasmine's former friends. but I had turned them against her. Sounds like fun, Keith responded. Would have been more fun if you were there, I then told him. I wanted Keith to feel bad whenever I was with him. He had a weakness for me when I seemed helpless and sad. So I always played it up a bit for him, so his attraction to me would grow. I'll do my best to clear schedule this weekend. We can do something together, he said to me. You promise? I said to him as I looked up at him with puppy eyes, trying to play up my innocent look. I promise. And to make up for not spending time with you, I'd like to give you a gift to apologize. What is it you want? I asked her. Just name it and I'll get it for you. I started as if thinking hard. A thought then came to mind. Perhaps I could joke with him. To have your last name. His eyes widened in surprise initially, but then his lips curved into a smile. He then chuckled after a moment. Diana Ackland. I like the sound of that. Don't worry, I'm working on it, I assured her. Hearing that put me at ease. Though I said the last name thing as a joke, it really wasn't. I just wanted to see if he was still planning on marrying me. He grabbed my hand and stretched out my fingers. Before long you'll be wearing a ring you're worried will break your finger from how heavy it is, he told me. That sounds nice, I said to him with a big smile. I can't wait to finally be your wife. After so many years. I always dreamed of this. I promise you things will be different this time, he told me as he hugged me back more strongly. I know he was planning on divorcing Jasmine, and it would take time, but I was too impatient. I wanted him to divorce her this instant and for us to get married tomorrow. I had to remember good things take time. He would marry me before long. I had worked so hard all these years to get to this stage. Keith, you wouldn't believe the things I had to do to get back in your life. All for that moment when I appeared at your birthday party with Marco in hand 2 years ago. This time you will choose me, Keith. You will be mine, and that woman and all the other people that tried to keep us apart won't succeed. That weekend after my first week of work, I had Tony and I go to the zoo and aquarium. Tony seemed to enjoy himself as we looked at all the animals. I realized I'd never taken him to zoo/aquarium in my past life. It was viewed as something for the working class, which I know was pretty classist. I took plenty of pictures of Tony and myself as we enjoyed our day. The following day, which was a Sunday, Tony and I deep cleaned the home. I did the laundry and hung it outside. Basically, resetting for the coming week. Once we were done and just relaxing, I decided to take a look at the pictures we had taken at the zoo the day before. A smile was on my face as looked at each picture. I was so grateful to be able to make these memories that I hadn't in my past life. I could look at these all day. I then looked around the house and noticed how barren and simple it looked. It kind of felt like a hotel, no personality or quirk to it. It could use having a bit more of a homey feel it by decorating the place. The pictures would make a wonderful decoration. In my past life, I didn't want to get comfortable in this house because I was intent on leaving and moving back to the main mansion. If only I could have told the me of the past to give up on that, because I ended up staying here until I died. I looked around the house looking for a good spot to put the pictures. There was a wall in the living room that was bare and seemed ideal to place the pictures. I had Tony and I work together to put the pictures on the wall. We first framed them, then put them up on the wall. Looks good, I commented once we finished decorating the wall. We need to add more pictures, the wall still looks empty, Tony pointed out to me. We will. We'll take more pictures from the activities we do in the future and fill up the wall and rest of the house. I explained to him that after I put Tony to bed, I went to my bedroom feeling and excited over the good weekend we'd had. I then checked the calendar to plan activities for him and I to do the next weekend. I noticed the date of the next Saturday was circled in red. I read the note on the space underneath. It was then that I realized the next weekend would be the Ackland annual party. It was an important event that took place every year at one of the Ackland hotels. In my past life, around this time when I went to the event, it was a complete disaster. As you already know, my reason for going was to see Keith. I had planned to use the event as a way to pounce on Keith, since he had been refusing to see me all the other times I tried to see him. I wanted to make him aware of the fact that Diana was mistreating me, and to get him to move us back into the main house. Of course, everything backfired. I made a fool of myself. Keith hated me more. I was banned from attending future parties and other events after that. Oh, and Diana was able to continue to torture me afterward in peace with no worries of Keith finding out. In this current life, this time around I wasn't planning on going. Though we were invited, there was no point in Tony and I going. Keith had to attend the event with his family. Even though I was still currently his wife, he attended the event with Diana and Marco. So if that was his chosen family, why would we go? And say we didn't go for Keith and just attended, we wouldn't have any friends to keep us company. All my former friends had turned against me and were Diana's friends now. We would just be met with stares and side eyes if we went. I would have us do something else that was fun instead. The following week went with no issue. I was getting more and more comfortable at work with each shift. I made friends with some of my coworkers as well. Do you want to go to the beach on Saturday? I asked Tony as we approached the end of the week. Tony's eyes sprung up. But aren't we going to Dad's party? He asked me. I hadn't realized he'd known about it, since I hadn't mentioned anything to him. People are talking about at school? I asked. He nodded his head. Many of the attendees of the party were the families of the students whom attended Tony's school. So all the rich people and socialites of Yorkshire and the country. Do you want to go to the party? I asked him. He contemplated for a moment before he shook his head. No, he answered. I think the beach would be more fun. I internally smiled at his answer. Like mother, like child, good to know he had a similar mindset to me. But won't we be in trouble if we don't go? He followed up. No, I confidently answered him. I doubted Keith would even notice our absence. However, I understood why this was odd for Tony. Before this year, we had attended the event every year. Even the year before, we had attended the party along with Diana and Marco. Are we ever going to see Dad again? He asked me. The question caught me off guard as I looked into Tony's eyes. He seemed conflicted as he looked back at me. I honestly don't know, I truthfully told him. But if you want, we can. I wanted to suggest that we could attend the party and try to have him meet with Keith, though I really didn't want to go. I honestly don't know, I truthfully told him. But if you want, we can. I wanted to suggest that we could attend the party and try to have him meet with Keith, though I really didn't want to go. No, I want to go to the beach. Tony interrupted me though. Dad wouldn't talk to me even if we went, he told me in a sad tone. It was then that I realized that while I wanted to let go of Keith and move on with my life without him, I couldn't expect the same of Tony. Keith was his father at the end of the day. A child would obviously love to have both their parents around. It would only be natural if Tony missed Keith. Plus, I'm mad at him for how he treated you, Mummy, he said angrily. My eyes widened in surprise. Part of me had wondered if Tony blamed me for what had happened to us. Everyone thought I was the crazy, unhinged, jealous woman who mistreated Diana, and that's why I was kicked out. To everyone else, it was my fault we were in this situation. I wondered, did it seem that way to Tony as well? His future self didn't mention that to me in the hospital the day I died. Either way, I was scared to ask him. But hearing him say this now made me feel like perhaps he didn't blame me. On the Saturday of the Ackland event party, Tony and I packed up our things for our trip. I made picnic food, sandwiches, fruits, juices. Let's go to the beach, Tony excitedly said once we were set for the day. Upon leaving the house, we were met with shining sun that let us know we were going to have a fun time at the beach. Tony and I walked down the paved pathway that lead to small gate and wall of our home. I saw the grass in the front yard next to the pathway and thought to myself, it needs a trim. Tomorrow I would have to do something about that. Upon reaching the small gate, I then noticed a car parked outside by the gate. It was a black sedan. Took me a moment before I recognized the car. It was one of Keith's. I went to the window of the car and it lowered, revealing the driver inside. Good morning, Mrs. Ackland. I've come to take you to the party today, he informed me. He looked me up and down in confusion as he spoke, noticing I wasn't dressed for the occasion. In my casual jeans, as it was an Ackland event, the Ackland family had to get there a little earlier. I'm sure Keith, Diana, and Marco were there already. As Anthony were also. I see, I responded to the driver. Did Diana send you? I then asked, but I already knew the answer. I am here to drive you to the event, he responded, not naming anyone. Even if he didn't say it, I knew it was Diana. I was always supposed to have a driver, but Diana made sure I didn't, among other things she prevented me from having. She only sent me one today so in case I met with Keith, he wouldn't see what she was doing. If I tried to make Keith aware of what Diana was doing anyway, she already had something prepared to cover her tracks. Just like what happened the last time when I attended the event. If I asked Keith to check with the servants and question them, they would all lie and say they had been serving me all along. Diana bribed them to lie on her behalf. I could only laugh at how calculated Diana was. The situation was ridiculous. We won't be attending the party today, so you can go back, I told the driver. My son and I are going to the beach. The driver's face filled confusion. I don't understand, he said. Just tell them I didn't want to go, I told him. The driver continued to look at me speechlessly. Without saying another word, I turned away from the car with Tony. We began to make our way to the beach without a care for the party. Tony and I had a blast at the beach. I was seated on beach chair, tanning in the sun, a colorful cocktail in my hand that I was drinking. I was also keeping an eye on Tony, who was playing nearby in the sand. Look at my sandcastle, Mum, he excitedly said to me. I looked from my sunglasses and saw the adorable sandcastles he was working on. Looking good, Tony, I told him. Just a nice, relaxing time. As the day progressed, we ate the food we packed, played in the sea. Tony made some friends whom he played with for a bit. I continued my tanning and relaxing as I watched. Rather than being in a place where we would be receiving glares from people and overall feeling uncomfortable, it was nice to just enjoy ourselves like this. I was so glad I had decided not to go to the party in the end. There was no need to unnecessarily stress ourselves. I also made sure to take plenty of pictures of Tony and I for memories. By early evening, Tony and I were completely satisfied with the day we had had. We then packed up our things and made our way home. The following day, Tony and I did a deep cleaning of the house as we now usually did on Sundays. We added more pictures to the wall of our day at the beach. I also cut the overgrown lawn in our front and backyard. I asked Tony to water the flowers and bushes around the yard. And the next day it was back to school for Tony and work for me. As we left our house, in a rush so I could get him to school on time, at the gate we were met with a car parked outside. My eyebrows furrowed in confusion. It was a black car similar to the one who was supposed to be my driver drove. I wondered what he wanted now. And the next day it was back to school for Tony and work for me. As we left our house, in a rush so I could get him to school on time, at the gate we were met with a car parked outside. My eyebrows furrowed in confusion. It was a black car similar to the one the person who was supposed to be my driver drove. I wondered what he wanted now. Then, to my surprise, as Tony and I walked out the gate, both driver and passenger doors opened and two men came out. They weren't my driver. As I looked at each of their faces, I recognized them to be Keith's men. They were some of his lackeys he would order and send out to do things for him. In my past life, they had been the ones send messages on Keith's behalf. They were the ones, sorry, what's this about? I asked them. In my past life around this time, I don't think I'd encountered them though. The chairman would like to see you this morning in his office, one of the men informed me. My eyes widened in shock. That's a statement I never thought I would hear. Keith had never asked to see me. His lackeys had never taken me to see him either. Why? I asked them. We were not told a reason, only that he would like to see you, one of them answered. I have to take my son to school, I told them. We will drop him off and then take you to see the chairman, they told me. Whatever Keith wanted to see me for, it couldn't have been good. After I was kicked out of the house, I only ever saw him a handful of times, and all those times weren't from him initiating the meeting. Even when he divorced me, I didn't see him. He would people to speak on his behalf and hand me the papers. So, for him to just out of the blue to want to see me when that never happened in the past was terrifying to me. I felt I was in trouble with him. Had Diana accused me of something? I'll be late for work, I can't see him, I informed Keith's lackeys. Tell him to send me an email or to relay his message to you too. I was happy to have a valid excuse because I did not want to see Keith. The two men looked at each other dumbfounded by my response. I then turned away with Tony. "Come on, we don't want to be late," I told Tony. How odd. I thought she would be excited to see the chairman considering how obsessed she was with seeing him. Exactly, but I heard she hasn't tried to see the chairman in the last 2 weeks. Really? You think she's finally given up? I wonder. I heard them talk about me as Tony and I walked away. I didn't really care though. I dropped off Tony at school and went straight to work. Throughout the day I couldn't stop thinking about Keith and the reason behind him wanting to see him. I wondered what the follow-up would be. Why did he want to see me? What could when my shift ended at 4 p.m., I left and went to pick up Tony. Upon arriving at his school, I waited outside his, was met with usual stares I got every day, but I was completely used to them now. Among the dozens of Tony came to me and I gave him a big hug. We then made our way to leave when we were met with a car that it was my supposed to be driver. He waved his arm at us. I went toward him in confusion. "What brings? I've come to drive you back home." He told me. "Why?" I asked. "As your driver, it's my job to drive you around." "Oh, shut it." I rolled my eyes at his script of a response. He wasn't going to tell me anything as per Diana's orders. It was obvious Diana was behind this, but why? It wasn't a good sign if she was sending a car for me. It's either she was playing a prank on me and if Tony and I got in the car he would drive to a desert and leave us stranded or something. Or perhaps her prank awaited me at home. Is it because I'd stopped coming to try see Keith? That I wasn't humiliating myself anymore? Diana did love to see me suffer, so maybe she had planned something. I wasn't in the mood for Diana's shenanigans. Not that I would never be in the mood. Nonetheless, if she had something planned at home, I would have to face it. "We're not going home with you," I told the driver and backed away from him. Tony and I went home the way we usually did with public transport. Upon arriving home, Tony and I saw 4 fancy sedans parked by the road near our gate. "Who's home, Mum?" Tony asked me with the same look of disbelief in his eyes. "I don't know," I commented. So had Diana had actually come? I thought to myself. I had Tony and I go towards the door. If Diana was here to confront me, I would face her head on. In my past life, I had become afraid of Diana because any confrontation would lead to Keith hating me and pushing him further away from me. However, now I didn't care anymore. Upon opening the door, I was met with a sight that had me in disbelief. Suddenly women came toward Tony and I. "Good evening, ma'am," they said to me. They were dressed in maids' uniforms. They took the bags that Tony and I were holding. I was too stunned to speak. I watched them walk away from us with our things. "The servants are back, Mum?" Tony asked me in confusion. "The servants are back in the house?" I asked myself as well. As we walked down the entrance hall ahead, I saw more servants running up and down the house. When did they get here? What were they doing here? What was going on? As we walked, my attention was caught by some shopping bags that were all over the floor. They were all from designer brands shopping bags. My confusion only grew as I wondered where they came from. "Diana, what were you doing?" Then we went to the living room where we found a group of people standing. Expecting to find Diana so I could confront I looked among the people. However, I saw they were only men. 4 of them wore simple black suits and stood around the room like guards. There was one other man who stood out from the bodyguards. He wore a different finer suit and was casually moving around. My eyes widened in horror as I recognized the person. This stature, this posture, the dark hair, was Keith. A sight just as horrible as if Diana was the one standing there, if not worse. He was looking at the pictures of Tony and I that were on the wall. What the hell was he of all people doing here? In my past life he had never once set foot in this house. Was this about the thing this morning? I thought he was going to reschedule or send an email. I never actually expected him to come himself. Was what he had to say to me that serious? He turned around to face me once as I approached. At this point in time, in my past life it wouldn't have been long since I'd seen him, but in this life it had been years since I'd seen him. As my eyes met his piercing blue eyes, all sorts of painful memories came to mind. The divorce, the legal battle that followed afterwards. "Jasmine," he said my name, pulling me out of my thoughts. "Keith," I said as I met his eyes. I felt a surge of rage course through my body. I fought the urge to punch him for everything he had done to me and Tony in the past. Technically, he hadn't done all those things yet, but he was soon going to. Whether it was the future or the past, it was still the same Keith. "Dad," Tony then said. "Hello, Anthony." Keith curtly greeted him as his eyes briefly glanced at him. I suddenly remembered Tony was beside me. I looked down at him and saw a sad, longing look in his eyes as he looked at Keith. I felt the anger I was trying to suppress course through me again. Tony was obviously happy to see Keith, but Keith wasn't even here for him. Just to yell at me about something, no doubt. I then knelt so I was eye level with Tony. "Tony, why don't you go and wash up and get started on your homework? I'll get dinner ready soon," I told him. If Keith was here to pick a fight with me, then I didn't want Tony to see me argue with him. "But Mum, if the servants are back, does that mean you won't make dinner tonight?" he asked me. "Don't worry about that. I won't be long with your father," I told him. "Okay." His sad eyes met mine and he slowly nodded, accepting my order. He then turned away and left the living room. Then my ears heard his footsteps go up the stairs to his room. I then stood up and turned to Keith, who had been watching my interaction with Tony. He didn't say anything as he stared at me intently. It seemed he was waiting for me to go first. "What have I done?" I asked Keith, breaking the silence. "What do you mean?" he asked me. "Why else would you be here? You've never set foot in this house before," I asked him. "So go on, tell me." I wanted to get this over and done with so I could get back to doing anything else but interacting with him. "You refused to see me this morning, so I decided to come see you myself," he started as he began to casually walk around the room with his hands in his trouser pockets. I watched him as he paced back and forth with my eyes narrowed. "You know, I found your refusal quite interesting considering how desperately you've been trying to meet with me every day for the past few months," he commented. "I had to go to work," I simply replied. He had obviously expected me to leave everything to see him, considering how the past me acted at this time. "Right?" he said as he rolled his eyes. Judging from his reaction, it seems he was aware I was working, and second, he didn't take the fact I was working seriously. "And why didn't you come to the event on Saturday?" he asked me. "I'm surprised you even noticed I wasn't there," I commented. "Attendance wasn't mandatory, was it? So, I took Tony to the beach." "I can see you two had fun," Keith commented, as he looked at the pictures on the wall. "Keith, what's this about?" Surely, he didn't care that much that I hadn't attended the Ackland party. "And what's all this?" I asked as I pointed to the shopping bags around the room. He chuckled in disbelief. "I was hoping you could tell me, Jasmine, since you're the one who bought them." "What?" I asked him in confusion. "What do you mean, what? There's no need to hide it, Jasmine. I know everything," he told, and then stared at me expectantly. It seems he was expecting me to confess, but I had no idea what he was talking about. "All right then, you finished your monthly allowance buying all this stuff for yourself and you're afraid to ask for more money, so you resorted to working in a restaurant as a waitress, right?" he told me in a disappointed tone. What he'd said sounded so absurd I wasn't sure if I'd heard right. I could only blink at him, stunned. "I'm just trying to understand is why you would make so many irresponsible purchases in the first place? And why that would make you resort to waitressing?" he asked in disbelief as he looked at me like I was crazy. My eyes widened as I finally pieced together what was going on. The reason the servants were back in the house, the reason the driver came to pick Tony and I when I went to pick him up from school was because of Diana. She knew Keith was coming to my house and didn't want him to know what she was doing to me. And she also made all these expensive purchases to make it look like I had finished my allowance from reckless spending and not due to her keeping it from me. Clearly that was the story she'd told him. Keith's POV earlier. The week before the Ackland event, I was seated at my desk going through some emails. I then heard the buzzer to my office ring. I saw it was Edwin and I let him in. He went to the coffee maker near my seating area and prepared some. "I found out what Miss Towers has been up to, as you requested," he said to me as he placed a black coffee on my desk. "Go on," I said as I took a sip of the coffee. "Well, she's working as a waitress," he told me. "What?" I said in disbelief, unsure if I'd heard right. She working as a waitress at the restaurant called the Garden House, he informed me again. There was a silence in the room for a moment as I stared at Edwin in surprise. You're sure? I asked him once more. That doesn't make any sense. Why would she be working at a restaurant? As a waitress, no less. I asked Edwin. I'm not sure, sir, he responded. Jasmine received a 50,000 USD allowance every month. That allowance didn't include expenses of the house she was staying in or anything else. The money was personally hers. What's more, there wasn't a limit on it. If she wanted more, she could request through one of my men since she couldn't directly contact me. So why on earth would she resort to working as a waitress? A woman like her that had grown up in wealth and luxury, could she handle commoner's job like that? Where did you say she was working again? I asked, still confused. The Garden House, sir, he reminded me. That's not one of ours, is it? I asked him. Though the Ackland Group specialized in hotels, we had bought other companies from other industries that were now subsidiaries of our company. I knew we bought a restaurant chain, but no, sir, it's owned by the Carringtons. Edwin corrected me. The Carrington family had one of the fastest growing companies of the decade. I remembered the stories I'd heard about them. They were in the fast food/restaurant business 10 years ago. Their company was a multimillion-dollar company, and now their company was well over $1 billion. I don't know what's going on with her. I can't figure out why she would be working, I said. Perhaps it's all a ploy to lower your guard and strike when you least expect it. My guess is she might be aiming to do something at the Ackland event this weekend, Edwin suggested before chuckling to himself. I glared at him. I'm sure you're looking forward to that, aren't you? I said to him in a threatening tone. Edwin's expression suddenly changed. He stopped laughing and coughed nervously. But you're right. She might actually have something planned. We'll have to stop her if that's the case. I agreed with Edwin. I want all the guards on the day to be ready to deal with her on Saturday. Yes, sir. He accepted my order. Saturday Ackland event. I looked in the mirror of my dressing room as I took in the suit I wore. A dark midnight blue suit that was tailored to my measurements. I nodded in approval as I signaled to one of the two servants helping me get dressed to come forward. The one who came held a tray contains my cufflinks, which I took and put in the sleeves of my shirt. Now finally dressed, I dismissed the servants and they left the room. I let out a sigh as I walked into bedroom, which was connected to the dressing room. Diana wasn't there. She was already dressed and was helping Marco getting ready. I left the bedroom and made my way to Marco's room. I opened the door and saw Diana and Marco standing in the middle of the room. Diana was in front of Marco, running her hands through his hair, as she seemed to be inspecting it and fixing it. Are you two ready? I then asked them. Diana jumped, startled by my sudden entrance, as she quickly let go of Marco's hair. She turned to me with an angered expression before, "Oh, darling. You scared me. I didn't hear you come in," she said. "Sorry." I apologized as I chuckled. The only servant helping her get Marco ready was her headmaid. Diana helped Marco get ready every day. She preferred it that way. I understood it because Marco had sensitive skin, and if anything aside from his prescribed soaps and lotions were used, he would have a nasty reaction. However, I do feel I could have some maids specifically trained to look after him. She didn't have to do all this work. However, since she insisted, I didn't want to make it an issue. I wanted her to do what made her feel comfortable. Shall we leave? I asked them. Yes, she responded. We then made our way to leave the mansion, where our car was waiting for us outside by the driveway. Of the many hotels Ackland Group had all over Yorkshire City, the event was taking place at one called Buckland Hotel. It was located just on the outskirts of the city near the airport. It was early in the afternoon at around 2 p.m. when we arrived at the hotel. As the host of the event, I had be earlier, though the main event starting at 5 p.m., but we were also early for other reasons. We were scheduled to have lunch with my father. We went to the dining area, where we waited in a private dining area for my father to arrive. Soon my father arrived along with two other people he brought with him, one of which I wasn't so excited to see. "Hello, father," I greeted him. "Keith." My father greeted me with a pat to the shoulder. He then greeted Diana and Marco. "Where's the wife?" he then asked, referring to Jasmine. "She'll arrive later," I answered. "Ah, Still on punishment, I see, he responded. My father didn't care for my personal life. Now that my marriage to Jasmine wasn't mandatory, he said I could do whatever I wanted. He was more concerned with the business. My father then turned to the young woman who stood beside him wearing daring red sparkling dress that left little to the imagination. This is Petunia, everybody. She'll be joining us for lunch. He introduced the woman to us. Say hello, Petunia. She smiled and greeted us. Hello, she said in high-pitched voice, and we awkwardly greeted back. So this was his latest sugar baby? She looked younger than me, maybe she was in her late 20s? My father was 68. I suppose this was better than the last woman he brought looked to be in her early 20s. Isn't she cute as a button? My father said as he squeezed her waist and bit his lip. My parents were divorced. My mother left him for cheating on her when I was 12. Go figure. Like I said, the only thing he cared about was the business. Oh, and your brother will be joining us as well, my father said as the third person who came with him stepped forward. It was my younger half-brother Colton. We had a 3-year age gap. Keith, it's been a while, hasn't it? Colton said as he came forward and shook my hand. It has. Good to see you're doing well, I commented and greeted him back. Colton had dark brown hair and golden eyes. We had a few similar features in terms of facial structure, but that was it. We smiled at each other, but our smiles didn't meet our eyes. We had a complicated relationship. We rarely saw each other and didn't grow up together. He lived and grew up with his mother. His mother being one of the many women my father cheated on my mother with. His mother passed when he was 17, and my father, who had been paying child support to her the whole time, decided to take him in. He paid for his university studies and afterwards incorporated him into the company. As a bastard child, my father couldn't make him a contender to take over the company, so he had him working as a CEO to one of our subsidiary companies. That way he and I wouldn't clash in the HQ due to our awkward relationship. After our introductions, we then went and sat down to have lunch. It was an awkward meal, but I did my best to act normal. After lunch, we went to the events room where the party would be taking place. We then split up from my father and brother. As the chairman, I had to greet and welcome the attendees, many of whom were business associates or potential business associates. For a little while, Diana, Marco, and we did this. I have to give my welcoming speech now. Will you be all right? I asked Diana before I left her, and Marco. Yes, I'll be fine. I'm just worried about what she might do when she arrives, Diana said worriedly. Don't worry, I won't let anything happen to you, I assured her. I knew she was referring to Jasmine. I too was worried Jasmine was going to try something given her desperation to see me. I had already told the guards to be prepared when she arrived, so hopefully her efforts would amount to nothing. With all these esteemed guests, I couldn't have her embarrassing me. I left Diana and Marco and met with my assistant Edwin. I did my welcoming speech, and then afterwards were a series of presentations of the history of the company and its success over the years. Afterwards the party ensued with all the guests networking, and I joined in. All in all, it a successful event. So what did you do with Jasmine? I asked Edwin at the end of the event, who I'm sure had received word from the guards. Edwin looked at me for a moment with a strange expression before answering. I wondered if she'd caused some kind of trouble. She didn't attend, sir. I processed his answer for a moment, unsure if I'd heard correctly. What do you mean? I then asked him, as my eyebrows furrowing in confusion. Just that. She didn't attend, sir, Edwin repeated. Her driver reported that she said she was going to the beach with the young master, Anthony, instead. I was at a loss for words as I looked at Edwin. Jasmine had missed the event? Couldn't believe it. I was so sure she was going to attend, since she'd been desperate to meet with me for a while now. So why hadn't she? You know what? I want a meeting schedule with Jasmine first thing Monday morning, I ordered Edwin. For the past 2 weeks, the things I had been hearing about Jasmine hadn't been making sense. Her suddenly stopping her incessant visits. Her getting a job as a waitress. I needed to see for myself what was going on with her. Especially with the report I had received from Diana about Jasmine's spending. Apparently she had finished her monthly allowance just buying luxury handbags and clothes. None of it what was making sense. What if this is her goal? What if all her actions as of late are a ploy for you to finally meet with her? Edwin suggested. It doesn't matter. I need to see her for myself and understand what is going on. If this is all a ploy, then that'll be the end of that, but if not, I need to know why she's acting like this, I said to Edwin. I was wondering if she'd lost her mind. Why buy so many unnecessary luxury goods and finish your money, then get a job as a waitress where you get paid so little? I just couldn't understand it. Monday, after the Ackland event, Keith's POV, I was coming out of one of the HQ meeting rooms, having finished an early morning meeting with the CEO, COO, CFO, CTO, etc. of the Ackland Group. I was making my way to my office when I bumped into the men I had sent to get Jasmine for my meeting with her. Where is she? I asked. I walked together with the men and wondered if they had already taken her to my office and she was waiting for me there. She refused to come, sir. My men informed me. My eyebrows furrowed in confusion. What do you mean she refused to come? Jasmine had been desperate to see me since I kicked her out of the mansion. Why would she refuse to see me? She told us she had to go to work and suggested you send an email or reschedule. One of the men told me. What, was she actually serious about this work thing? There was no way. After the report Diana had given me, I had concluded she was working because she'd finished her allowance. Perhaps she was embarrassed? I considered the thought. Perhaps she was embarrassed about the situation and that's why she was hesitant to see me. As I sat back down at the desk in my office, I thought about what I should do about Jasmine. As much as I was annoyed by her actions as of late, I didn't want her to suffer. I still wanted her well looked after even if I didn't want to be with her anymore. So I made the decision to go visit her myself at her home that evening. I had never once been to the house. Tonight would be my first time. Back at Jasmine's house. Monday evening after Ackland event, Jasmine's POV. I'm just trying to understand why you would make so many unnecessary purchases in the first place, but to then resort to waitressing? He asked in disbelief as he looked at me like I was crazy. My eyes widened as I finally pieced together what was going on. The reason the servants were back in the house, the reason the driver came to pick Tony and I when I went to pick him up from school, was because of Diana. She knew Keith was coming to my house and didn't want him to know what she was doing to me. And she also made all these expensive purchases to make it look like I had finished my allowance from reckless spending and not due to her keeping it from me. Clearly that was the story she told him. This is crazy. That woman was insane, I thought to myself. My lips curved into a smile and I began to laugh hysterically. It was a situation so ridiculous I couldn't help but laugh. Her dedication to keeping her image was interesting. I could imagine her finding out Keith was coming to my house and then rushing to send all the servants and driver to the house in time. Is something funny? He asked me as I laughed. No, not at all, I replied as I calmed myself. Well, is there anything you want to say since you were refusing to speak before? He asked me. What do you want me to say? I asked him. I didn't refute what Diana was accusing me of. I had had this conversation so many times before with Keith. I knew whatever Diana had showed him to, he fully convinced. Jasmine, this so out of character for you. First of all, you don't need to be embarrassed. If you need money, you can just ask for more. You don't need to resort to working as a waitress. And you don't need all this stuff, so why did you buy it? He asked me with a surprised expression. I could only stare at him wide-eyed and speechless. I couldn't believe he believed that. Who on earth would spend 50 grand on things they didn't need and then when the money finished resort to working at a restaurant? And as he said, I had more than enough bags and clothes already. Why would I buy more? Is that how stupid he thought I was? Just how much did Diana have him wrapped around her finger? I took out my phone, opened the bank app, and without looking immediately presented the screen to him. He looked at the phone and read through it before turned his gaze back to me. What exactly is that supposed to show? He asked me, looking at me like I was crazy. What do you mean, what is it supposed to show? Look at it. You can clearly see I only received $1,000. I said to him. Right here. I continued as I looked at the screen myself, and then became completely flabbergasted. The information on the bank app had changed. It showed I had 1,000, but it also showed I had received the 50,000 and then made several transactions, finishing my money. How? How had she done it? There was no way. Yes, it shows you have $1,000 now because you spent it all, Jasmine, he said to me as if I were dumb. Keith, I swear it's not. It wasn't like this before. I tried to explain, knowing I looked insane. You're saying what? She changed bank information? He asked as he cocked an eyebrow, looking at me like I was crazy. My expression changed to one of disbelief. Look, I know how it looks, but you have to bail, I tried to explain. Jasmine, look, I understand the situation you're in is not ideal, having been moved out of the estate, but you have to agree it's a consequence of your own actions. However, your recent actions have me concerned. Maybe you need to talk to somebody to help you with what he suggested. There was no way he was suggesting I get mental help. My eyes widened in disbelief. Oh my God, Keith, we're not doing this. I interrupted him in an annoyed tone. I didn't care that he thought I was mad, but I wasn't going to let him berate me to my face. I couldn't stand his condescending tone either. He thought I was losing my mind due to him kicking me out.